Church. We've been doing some announcements. We don't have one this week with Safe Families. That's another thing with Manoj and a whole team. It's an awesome, like, if you imagine, people who kids that, like, you look at them and they have a family and everything's working out okay. It's not perfect, but it's okay. To like the foster system where things are falling apart and they're in maybe a group home or something like that. And then there's this ministry right before that tries to prevent that, and that's Safe Families. And basically what they're doing is they're saying, why doesn't, we say this all the time, don't we? Why doesn't someone step up, or why doesn't the church step up? And there's all these arguments like, why doesn't the government step up? And I don't know where we fit in all of that, but I know the church needs to step up. And this is like a doorway that we have where we can do real good in our own community with kids who are hurting. So if you want more information, Manoj is the guy to talk to about that. And also, one of the things that we do here for our own kids, as you might have recognized, is whenever there's a fifth Sunday of the month, we have our kids in church with us. We call it family style worship. So that's today. So kids, welcome. You're going to be here the whole time. And we just like to say this. We totally understand there's going to be a little bit more noise when they're in here. Like they don't know how to whisper. And that's fine. We're totally cool with a little extra noise. Hopefully you are. I make more noise than they do, and I bug them more than they bug me, and that's the kind of deal that we have. But they're in here, and we love it. And we're going to be also finishing Galatians chapter 5 today. We've been walking through this book that Paul wrote to these people in this region called Galatia. So a little bit about that letter, and then we'll dig right in. So Paul writes this letter. If you don't know who Paul is, he was a total Christian hater, right? He was the epitome of I hate Christians and I'm going to stop them. And he was a Pharisee, which was a Jewish religious leader at that time. He thought Christians were crazy. He thought he didn't believe in Jesus. He thought he was glad that they had killed Jesus, and he wanted to start killing Christians and kill this whole Christianity thing. And then one day he has this experience with Jesus, which transforms his whole life. He literally meets Jesus when he's walking on this road, and it transforms his life. Now his all of his zeal, and he has a tremendous amount, goes towards spending his life going all over the place and telling people about Jesus. Right? That's Paul. And he does 3 major missionary journeys. In the first one, he goes through this region called Galatia. And he's telling them about Jesus. And people are falling in love with Jesus. They're planting some churches. And then Paul moves on because that's what he does. He tells them about Jesus, plants churches, moves on. When he moves on, all of a sudden he gets report that back in Galatia, there's this other group that came in. They're called the Judaizers. And they were basically saying, like, Paul had a weak message. He told you that you needed Jesus and that was enough, but that's not true. You also need to follow a bunch of rules. And so Paul writes this letter back to them and says, I can't believe you guys are falling for that. I came to you, I spent time with you, you knew me, we talked about it, and the message that these guys are giving that you need Jesus plus a bunch of works is baloney, basically. It's not a good gospel. It's not a gospel at all. And so he spends this whole letter, we've been walking through it piece by piece, and today we're in a really cool portion of it in Galatians chapter 5. But in order for us to really understand what Paul's saying, I want to just start with a verse that Jesus said about life. This is a profound thing that Jesus said about life. So much in this text. And it's in John 10:10. I'm just going to read it real fast, and then if you're turning your Bibles, you might as well just go to Galatians 5. We're going to be there in 10 seconds. Jesus says this. He says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly, or have fullness of life. And so what Jesus is saying, why this is so profound, because we can all relate to this in this sense. Everybody who's a human, I don't care how old you are, how small you are, I don't care what your background is, everybody has an innate sense within them that they want a life that has fulfillment. You want life that has fulfillment. And you use words like I want purpose, or I want enjoyment, or I want to do what makes me happy, or whatever it is, but you ultimately want your life to have purpose, meaning, you want fulfillment. You don't want to be empty and shallow. You want fulfillment in life, right? We all on the same page? And everyone says amen or something cool like that? Yeah, boom, I love this church. Now, everybody has that. But here's the thing, we don't all agree with how to get that, do we? There's all kinds of disagreement of what does it look like to have a real life, a full life. And then there's all these like tensions within our relationship, like don't judge me, I'm just doing what I think's going to make me happy, why don't you want me to be happy? There's all this tension within our relationships, and it all comes down to this innate desire to have fulfillment in life. And here Jesus goes, hey, there's this enemy that you have to be aware of. He's a thief. He comes to steal and destroy that which would really bring fulfillment. And yet Jesus says right here, I'm the answer. And Paul is making this argument, the same exact argument, that the whole gospel is that Jesus is the answer, that Jesus is where we can find fulfillment, that we're broken, we need something. We all know we need something. Nobody's like, my life's perfect. You know, we try to pretend like it is, right? Like if you look at all of our Facebook profiles right now, we lie to each other, we lie to ourselves like, yeah, well, our lives are perfect, but we all know they're not, right? We got some issues, and yet, here's the deal. Jesus is making this promise. I'm the answer. And these guys, these Judaizers are, in a sense, they're coming in and going, no, Paul said Jesus is the answer, but, well, yeah, kind of, Jesus is part of the answer. But you also need to follow all of these rules as if those are going to fulfill you. And so in Galatians chapter 5, Paul just hammers this issue in a really cool way. So let's dig in, let's look at it. Galatians chapter 5. And the first thing that he's going to say, he's going to go in verse 13, he's going to talk about how to treat one another. How to treat one another. That's a super big issue, right? Because we all have one another's in our life. Right? Relationships are a big part of our life. And so Paul's going to start off in saying that how we treat each other is a really big deal. And he starts off in verse 13. He goes, "For you are called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another." Now remember this idea of us desiring to be fulfilled and the idea of relationships being just something that none of us can avoid, right? It's a part of all of our lives and it's a big deal. And it has a lot to do with that. And the first thing really what Paul is saying here is that we need to reject self-centered living. We need to reject self-centered living. And you can think about it, if fulfilling yourself is your number one priority or is a huge priority, it's easy to become self-centered. Right? It's easy to say, how is that going to affect me? Everything I do, how is it going to affect me? How is this personally going to affect my fulfillment? Because that's my biggest goal. And Paul's saying something that's counter to what we normally experience. We say things like that. All of us go, none of us goes like, who thinks it's cool to be selfish? None of us are going to be like, yeah, selfishness is awesome. Right? Selfishness, we all know it's bad, but we all struggle with it. Self-centered living. And so two things particularly Paul talks about when it comes to self-centered living in this letter is he says reject self-righteousness. Reject self-righteousness. You might call this legalism. In essence, what this is, self-righteousness, is believing that somehow you have earned God's favor by what you do or what you don't do, right? I do all these certain things, and so I'm a good person. God, I'm in good standing with God. I have favor with God. God's going to bless me. I'm doing really good. Paul had a lot of experience with this. He was a Pharisee. He thought, I'm the best Pharisee there is. I follow all of the rules. I know all the rules. I follow all of them. Paul was filled with self-righteousness. And what it led him to do was to just see everybody else as less than him. And to feel like he was doing a favor by literally going out and killing and imprisoning people who were different than him. Right? Self-righteousness can be incredibly ugly. And self-righteousness is when you believe that somehow you, by what you do or what you don't do, can earn God's favor. Can earn God's blessing. And even if you're not a Christian, whoever God is, you would think, by the way that I live, I'm somehow earning God's favor, and then somehow, ultimately, that is going to fulfill that missing piece within me. I'm going to get that fulfillment through self-righteousness. And Paul's like, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And then the other side of that, if self-righteousness won't get you, the other one is reject self-gratification. That's when you just give free license to yourself. If self-righteousness is following a strict ideal or strict rules, whether they're Christianity or just whatever, you make up your own rules. Like a lot of people do that. I just make up my own standards, and I think everyone should live by that, and I live by that standard, and that's what makes me okay. Right? And yet there's this other side where people just kind of reject that, and then it's just self-gratification. It's the people where you get your bumper sticker and you say, I'm just doing what makes me happy. Or this one, just follow your heart. Really? I don't know. Your heart, which is broken, and so much stuff happens to our heart, you really can trust it to lead us, right? Follow your heart. But that's what makes me happy. Here's the idea, is that somehow you know what's going to make you fulfilled, and you're just going to do whatever makes you happy, right? YOLO. Right? So there's this idea of self-gratification, and he goes, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. That means you're free in Christ, right? He's paid the price. There's no longer, you don't follow the Mosaic law, and yet that doesn't give you licentiousness to just go out and do whatever you want. Right? And ultimately, what you're saying is, I'm going to do whatever I want because that's what's going to make me happy. That's what's going to fill me. And kids, you get this, right? How many of you guys know that Christmas is coming right around the corner? I mean, here's the deal. When I was a kid, I don't know about you guys, are probably way more mature and advanced than me, but when I was a kid, I used to make these lists they're called Christmas lists, right? And I would write down all of the things that I need for Christmas, right? And I would make wonderful cases like a lawyer would with my parents. You know, I had advanced strategies of walking through Target, and I'd be like, hey, Mom, look at that thing. Isn't that neat? Like my mom's going to want a dart gun or something, right? Or some game, right? And I had all these strategies, but ultimately I'm like, this is really what this is a list of the things that I need in order to be happy for Christmas. And every Christmas I learned, it never works, right? I mean, I had fun with maybe the toys that I had, but it wasn't the answer. It wasn't the answer. It didn't ultimately satisfy. And trust me, as I grew older, right, it was like, I need to have that job, right? I need to have that car. I need to have that circumstance and changed in my life. I need this, I need that. Ultimately, something out there's got to make me happy, right? And it's just believing somehow, either by following a strict set of rules, or by just saying no rules, let's do whatever I want, somehow we can do it ourselves. We can fill ourselves up and have fulfillment. And he's like, all of those, really, if you think about it, the epitome of self-centeredness. Me, I can do it. And he's saying we got to reject that. And then ultimately he says the answer is not just rejecting self-centered living, but embracing loving one another. He says you're gonna not have this opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. So embracing, loving one another. And some of the things we've been talking about through Galatians is this. If we're going to love one another really the way that Jesus is telling us to, one of the first things we need to do is we need to remember that we are broken. Right? Like Facebook, why don't we just do like a brokenness? Was there something that rhymes with B or something that we do like Throwback Thursday? But we can just remind, like, we just take a picture of something like messed up in our life, or just do like like instead of being like I went to Disneyland and look at my latte, we could go like I stubbed my toe, or something like that. Like life's real. I lost my job. We don't like to do that, right? Let's be honest and say, hey, we all have one thing in common. Everybody in this room, lots of diversity in here, but here's one thing we have in common. So we're broken. We're not, there's something that's not okay with us. Right? We're broken. And here's why this is so important. Not that we would celebrate our brokenness, but we would recognize our brokenness, because in our brokenness, in recognizing our brokenness, is where real joy comes from. It's when real gratitude comes from. See, because if you're self-righteous, if you can earn God's favor, then what you are is you're entitled to something. I've earned it. And then when it doesn't go your way, what do you get? You get upset. You feel wronged. Right? And so either you get what you deserve, and then what's the exciting joy about that, right? We just got what we deserve when good things happen, or when bad things happen, we got wronged. Right? And so it robs you of your joy. Jesus tells a story, we looked at this last week, of this woman who's a sinful woman. She comes in to Jesus. They already had an encounter. Jesus had already loved her. They already had a relationship. He'd already given her forgiveness. And she comes in during this dinner that he's having with these really self-righteous, like we've been talking about, these self-righteous Pharisees. And she walks in, and that was kind of weird, right? And these Pharisees, in their mind, they're all looking at her and going, she is so dirty, sinful. If Jesus really knew who she was, he wouldn't allow her, because she started crying because she was so grateful, and her tears were going on Jesus' feet, and she was washing his feet with her hair. And there's these self-righteous people going, who does she think she is being here? Right? They thought they were better. They forgot they were broken, and they saw her brokenness, and they wanted her out of here. And Jesus, in essence, tells this story, and it ends up with him saying, those who have been forgiven much, love much. And that's true. Those who realize how broken they are, and realize that they need Jesus, and that Jesus has come from heaven to earth and died on a cross to cover that brokenness. When you realize that, I don't know about you, but for me, it does something inside of me. It makes me feel like, man, I love that God who would do that for me. It leads us to love. Knowing that you're forgiven, knowing that you're broken and that you're forgiven, it's what produces a love for God. And when we have a love for God, it fills up so much, and we're around people all the time. The next level is that when we remember that we're broken, we can see other people clearly, the way Jesus sees them. Right? Like, you're not going to, we used this analogy last week, but I'll use it again. Like, none of us are driving down the street, and then someone cuts us off, and we go, I bet you're having a bad day. Right? None of us do that. I bet you had a bad childhood, and there's something going on in your life. I'm going to pray for you. None of us do that, right? We go, jerk. Right? We immediately realize what kind of person that is that just cut us off, and we feel like they've wronged us, and we bite and we devour. Exactly the thing he says. If we just live in a life like that, where we're constantly biting and devouring, what kind of a society is that? What kind of a church is that? What kind of a social media is that? It's ugly. That's what he's saying. So embrace loving one another. Remember you are broken so that you can have gratitude and joy, so that you can see people as Jesus sees them. And then remember God's grace towards you. Grace is being treated better than you deserve. Grace is being treated better than you deserve. Jesus treats you better than you deserve. You have to understand that. You didn't earn it. There's nothing you can't follow a set of rules enough to earn it. The bottom line is that the gospel is that grace is that Jesus, that God has treated you better than you deserve. You don't deserve it. And yet he gives it to you anyways. And so Paul, in this whole letter, is making this argument. Don't buy into this fact that somehow you can earn it, because you're going to lose your joy. And you're going to lose the ability to see people the way that Jesus sees people. And that's why it's such a big deal to him. You're, in essence, you're going to lose what it means to be a Christian, which is to love God and to love others. When you're broken, you can love God because you've been forgiven much and you love much. And when you're broken, you can love others because you can see that past all of this stuff in their life, and you can treat them better than they deserve. That's why it's such a big deal, right? And yet we tend to get me-centered and forget all of that. If we're honest. I do too. I had a really hard week. Yesterday morning, I'm not going to lie to you, for about an hour and a half, I knew what was going on in this turmoil, but I was like in just a hard spot. You ever been in that spot where it's like, I know what I should be thinking, but I can't make myself think that right now? That's me. And I hated it. I'm mad at myself, I'm mad at everything, I'm mad at, but then I'm not, and I'm having this pastoral conversation. And here's why you shouldn't be mad at that person for what they did, right? I'm having this whole dilemma, right? It was consuming, and yet God took care of all of it in the end. And I wish I'd have just remembered that right from the beginning, right? Because when we have God in our life, when we realize we're broken, then we have moments like that, and we have Him, right? I don't know if it does anything to you, but for me, that just gives me a tremendous amount of confidence about an uncertain future. I call that hope and faith. It just gives me a tremendous amount of confidence, but uncertain future, because I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. And so we got to remember that. But here's why it's hard. And he gets to, here's how it's hard. Here's how you should treat people. But here's why it's hard. In Galatians 5:16, he goes, "But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. For these are opposed to each other, to keep you from doing the things you want to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law." So the first reason we see here of why it's hard is that we have an internal conflict going on in us right now. If you're a Christian, you have an internal conflict that's going on within you all the time. If you're not a Christian, you don't really have this internal conflict. You have a lot of conflict, but it's an external conflict that you internalize. But you literally have this internal conflict, and here's how it works. Our sinful desire, he keeps calling it our flesh. Our fleshly desires or our sinful desires. Paul's saying, don't follow your sinful desires, your flesh. Right? Your flesh, in essence, is that part of you that thinks it knows what you need. It's the part of you that helps you write Christmas letters. It's the part of you who's constantly not happy or satisfied because you don't have it yet, right? It's the part of you that's constantly telling you need something else. It's in essence, it's your stomach. It's your appetite. It's what you think you need, right? Your flesh is your simple desire. Now here's the thing. There's this internal conflict going on. You guys probably seen the cartoons, right? Kids have seen this, where you have an angel type figure, and then a devil type figure, and the angel's like, do the right thing, all right? And the devil's like, no, the right thing is to do what's fun, right? And he never just goes do something bad. He always tries to make it sound like it's good. That's this internal conflict. Your flesh is constantly trying to make you believe that sin is awesome. That's what your flesh is. Your flesh is that voice within you that's like, sin is awesome. I know that Paul came to you, Galatia, and said sin, sin, ooh, bad, yuck, sin. But sin is awesome, right? Sin looks like something that's going to be like give you some pleasure for a moment. Sin always is, if it looked gross, we wouldn't fall for it. It never looks gross. It always looks like awesome. The problem is then you go and you consume that sin, right? And then does it feel awesome? It never leads to awesome. Right? It's a lie. So you're supposed to plan church, and trying to figure out, what does this mean? When I make big decisions, this is helpful for me. Because I don't know, you don't always know how to follow the Spirit, right? It's like an abstract thought. But here's the thing. Here's a couple things. Number one, first of all, just stop trying to think you have it all figured out. Surrender to the process. You can't control all of your circumstances. You can surrender to the process. And bring some things into your life. You know what's good about having a church family? Not because if you come to church, God's happy with you and then He blesses you. That's just not how it works. But you get to be around some people, hopefully, that you can start to trust and can start to help you figure things out. Like decipher those things. They can help you. I want to help you, and I want you to help me. Let's put it that way. And why do we want you to get just one chapter a day in the Bible? Because if you're not going to listen, if you're not going to have any conversations with someone, then guess what they are? They're a stranger. It's hard to follow a stranger. right? Don't be a stranger. That's why I read the Bible. Don't be a stranger with God, right? And then that inner voice thing, like, I don't want us to be afraid of that. But you can't put all of your trust in that. Because how do you know it's your stomach or your flesh versus your inner voice? That's the hard part about it. That's why you have all this other stuff in balance. Well, let's stand up and worship. And I just want to prompt you and end it like this. We've talked about this a lot. And you guys have, it seems like you guys, a lot of people will raise their hands. How many of you guys want to surrender to the process and today have no new thing that you need to do, but just to lay it at Jesus' feet and say, God, I need you to take over my life. I need you to take over from this point on, and I want to follow you. I don't want to follow my flesh. I don't want to try to figure it out myself because now I'm just stressed out. And you just want to surrender to the process, whatever that looks like for you. And if you need prayer, there's going to be people that want to pray for you back there. If you're just like, you know what, I need some help in this. Thank you. Good. You finally get it. You need some help in this. So what's this all about? Then just one step towards that is to go get prayer. Come ask for prayer for me. Ask for prayer for the person that you came with. But let's respond to God, His goodness, and surrender ourselves to Him who is the answer. Amen?
Amen.